And a big debate is going on at the moment within the American administration. I know this because I go to the States a lot and have participated in this debate in public with the two different factions, if you like, within the State Department. One faction quite openly says that we have to develop an exit strategy out of Afghanistan as soon as we can, or else this is going to grow and grow. It is going to create an incredible mess inside Pakistan, which it has already begun to do, and before we know it, we will destabilize another country, and this is a nuclear state, and the sky's the limit. Anything can happen. The other wing, currently led by Bruce Riedel, advisor to Obama on South Asia, says, no, well, we may have to think of an exit strategy at some stage, but we can't pull out from Iraq and Afghanistan. We've got to try and do something in Afghanistan, and so we send in more troops and general Petraeus, and let's hope that something works out. But the point is that, sending in more troops isn't going to do the trick. Because as every single intelligence report coming out from Afghanistan has informed the American administration, they ain't wanted there. They had a small window of opportunity when they went in immediately after 9/11. A small window of opportunity of, I would say, 6 to 8 months, where if a lot of work had been put in and they had a plan to rebuild the country, to reconstruct the country, to use the sort of shock and awe, not in bombing the mountains, but in building schools, homes, small clinics, it might have done it. I'm not 100% sure, but it's something which wasn't tried. And instead of which, they planted a regime, a guy who constructed a regime, which is now Hillary Clinton. I don't know how many of you caught her being testifying to the Senate for her confirmation hearings. She said it's a total mess and it's a narco state. What she didn't say in public, but where she hinted very strongly, was that this is a narco state which is the doing of the people we put in power. And the New York Times has reported now 3 times that the brother of the Afghan president, Hamid Karzai, is the richest man in the country, and a heroin smuggler and an arms dealer. Now, when you have that level of corruption right at the top of the regime, then it's the head that is rotten. It's not something which happens on a lesser level, though it does. The big problem is the people at the top. And they have failed miserably. And now the United States, as per usual, is discussing how to get rid of him. The problem is, if you get rid of him, who will you put in his place? There aren't, obvious candidates flying around. And the result of this failure in Afghanistan has been that what the British Foreign Office and British intelligence services call the neo-Taliban, i.e. a reconstituted Taliban, which includes large layers of the Pashtun, which is the majority population in Afghanistan, represent a majority in southern Afghanistan. And I mean, when the Taliban actually ruled the country, it was a pretty malignant social order, it has to be said. These new guys are different, according to reports I've read, in the sense that they're quite modern. They have, they deal with the West quite openly. They have skin doctors, they have their own television services, they make videos. They've learned on how to deal with the West. And for the last 8 months to a year, there have been behind-the-scenes negotiations between the Americans and the neo-Taliban. And the American government has been persuading them, even under Bush, to come in and join the government, To which they reply, A, we can't join this government because it's totally discredited and corrupt. B, we cannot enter a coalition government as long as there are foreign troops on our soil. We just can't do it. So this is the dilemma now confronting the United States, which is being debated. I think sending in 20,000 more US Marines is going to fail, because if you want to crush a population like that, then in my opinion you need, I hope it doesn't happen, because it will mean endless death, destruction and civil war in Pakistan. But I think what it will mean is at least 500,000 soldiers and massive bombings, and the Afghans could lose up to 500,000 people. Now, what is that? Who is that going to serve if all it does is give you temporary control of a country, but in fact unleash a civil war in a neighboring country? So let us hope that the United States administration comes out on the right side and develops an exit strategy. Now, what could such an exit strategy be? I have argued, both in my book and in various magazine essays here and in the States, that an exit strategy should not repeat what the United States did in the early 90s, which is hand the country over to Pakistani military intelligence and then run. Because were they to do that, we could have a repeat of what happened in 91. I don't think they will do that, because A, it would be crazy, and it would create mayhem and continuing civil war in Afghanistan. But secondly, there is an alternative, but that alternative means doing a deal, getting a regional solution, and that means essentially involving 4 countries. Pakistan, of course, which is critically important. India, which is the local big power. Iran, which has a lot of influence in Western Afghanistan, and whether the Washington likes it or not, Russia and Putin, because they control Central Asia and have to be brought on board if we are going to have a coalition government guaranteed by these regional powers for, let's say, a period of 10 years, and these regional powers preventing any violence from taking place, which they could do, were they to agree. And then a lot of money to rebuild the country. Afghanistan now has been at war since 1979, when the Russians went in. And we are in 2009 now. Continuous war. And just imagine what that war does to the psychology of the people. Kids growing up in a permanent war situation. And it also makes violence a fact of everyday life. People take it for granted. So it has to, it's not going to end on it by its own, but a regional solution could do it. And then the Chinese, of course, are the only state still with a bit of money to spend, could be brought in to help rebuild parts of the country in terms of giving it a social infrastructure so that long last something good comes out of it. It can be done if the political will is there. And all the indications are that the United States has been talking to the Iranians behind the scenes. They did it before going into Iraq, and they did it before going into Afghanistan. Because the Iranians, for their own reasons, hated the regime in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they essentially backed the United States, though they didn't do it publicly. They did it behind the scenes. So it's not that there are no channels of communication between Tehran and Washington. They have been there now for some years. And they have their tiffs as well, especially on the nuclear issue, thanks because of the pressure of Israel. But apart from that, the links are there. And Ahmadinejad, the Iranian president, said 2 days ago he's prepared to do a deal with the United States. And this is, of course, linked to Iraq and Afghanistan, because the United States knows now, as a result of what they did in Iraq, this may not have been their intention, though they were warned by a number of senior analysts that if you go and do this and totally remove a regime and create a new dispensation, then the power which